Dear church, let's talk about marriage and family. Hello and welcome to the Dear Church podcast. I'm Chris McCurley, and today we have a special guest. My good friend Trey Morgan is joining us from Childress, Texas. You know, Trey, I thought about putting some sort of, live from Queensland or something, from Australia, or make it a little more interesting. But no, just Childress, Texas, where it's like an oven, you said. And
it is outrageous here.
Obviously, you're indoors for this podcast. Yes. And if you guys don't know Trey Morgan, but I think most of you do, Trey and his wife Lee conduct marriage seminars, stronger family seminars all over the country, and are gone many weeks out of the year to do that, and we are so glad that Trey has decided to join us today. Trey is a dear, dear friend of mine, but also someone I consider to be a guru on this subject, and someone who not only knows a lot about it and gives practical advice, but also lives it, and I think that's really important. So Trey, thank you for being here. Welcome to the Dear Church podcast.
Honored to be here. Thank you for having me on today.
Thank you, brother. So we're going to start with, just talking a little bit about marriage. And I know you do marriage and family. We'll talk a little bit about marriage for a moment. Okay. Everywhere you turn, the statistics are pretty much doom and gloom in our society when it comes to marriage. And what is your feeling? How do we fix that? Is there a way to fix it? I mean, what do we do? I know probably be proactive rather than reactive, but what are some thoughts that you have on maybe fixing that?
Well, the sad truth is it is a fact that about 50% of all marriages end in divorce, and that doesn't matter if the couple considers themselves Christians, church-going people, whatever it is. We aren't exempt from that, and I think one of the mistakes that a lot of couples make is they kick back and they go, "Hey, this couldn't happen to us. Our marriage would never have something come along that would cause a divorce." And one of the big mistakes a lot of couples make is they come in and they go, "Hey, not us. We would never do that." And I think when you let your guard down and you say, "It won't happen to me," bad things, the chances around the corner are not good. Satan loves the opportunity to catch somebody who thinks they're standing firm and not looking out for him. But he is so good at wrecking marriages and families. And as melodramatic as it sounds, the key to fixing about 95% of everything that is wrong in our country right now is if we could fix the marriages the way God designed them to be and the families, we would fix about 95% of all the things that ails our country right at this point. It is the key. And as churches, as Christians, as Christian parents, Christian grandparents, we have to be intentional at reaching out and starting being progressive in the marriage ministry and in the family ministry. And we cannot sit idly by and just hope people are catching on and understanding. We've got to have Bible classes. We got to have seminars and workshops. There should always be something going on, Bible studies that deal with marriage and family and blended families. Because, our folks out there are in a war, and it breaks my heart because every day Lee and I are dealing with people that are feeling the effects bad. There are just marriages that we kick back sometimes and think there's just no way that would happen to those folks. Marriages that we just don't think anything good, strong marriages that are just crumbling and falling apart. And we're floored sometimes at kind of the things going on at this time. And we need to do a good job at being proactive.
Well, I like what you said there. A lot of what you said there was great. But one thing that I picked up on in particular, I don't want to bash the church. That's not what this program is for. But, one thing that I have noticed is, the church, by and large, in general, over the years, has not done a great job of handling this issue. I mean, we stand really hard on divorce and on remarriage, but when it comes to the proactive side, we don't talk much about sex. We don't talk much about, the proactive side of it. And so what you say really strikes a chord because I think that's where we need to start. I say all the time, the best time to get a divorce is before you get married. And
that's true.
And one of the things that you do, and you and I both do, we both will not do a wedding unless you go through premarital counseling. And we don't charge people. Right. We don't charge because we don't think that they will do it if we do charge. So tell us a little bit about what you talk about in the premarital counseling with couples.
Well, so many couples go into their wedding, planned for their wedding. I mean, they have spent months and tons of money getting ready for a wedding, and they've done nothing to get ready for a marriage. They know who stands where and when they go and what colors we're going to have and what songs play where, but they have no skills when it comes to all of a sudden I'm going to be living and married to someone new, and I've got to figure out how to adjust. And 2 months, 6 months later, they're going, "What have I got myself into?" They were prepared for a wedding, but not for a marriage. And premarital counseling is just no way I'm doing a wedding without some premarital counseling. Even the state of Texas now is giving discounts to couples getting premarital counseling because it's a benefit to even the state to go, hey, these people need to know what they're getting into. And so we talk about everything from things that couples don't talk about. You hear couples all the time. We'll survive. We'll figure it out as we go. You better figure it out before you get in there.
Exactly.
And then you hear sometimes some people that will go, well, I think I'm going to be able to change him, or I think this issue we have will fix it. No, these are things you need to work on before you're at the front of the auditorium or the church or the chapel or whatever it is. And you got to figure out this way ahead of time. Don't you wait until after marriage, because things won't change after marriage. And so premarital counseling is a must. And you've got to talk about conflict resolution, which no one goes into marriage in life going, I'm really good at conflict resolution. And couples don't know how to handle conflict. A lot of them don't know how to handle money. Depending on the couple, if they're an older couple, now the average statistics today, men marry at 29 and women at 27. And so they've already experienced life, and a lot of life, outside of being married. So they're kind of set in their ways, and they've got to adjust to some of those things. Where back in the 80s, when you and I married, I'm sure you're back in the 80s.
I'm much younger than you.
There you go. But back when we married, the average age for men was 22 and women was 20. And so Lee and I weren't set in our ways when we got married. We didn't have any ways because we went from living at home to getting married. And so, there's a lot of things that need to be discussed in premarital counseling, and the church needs to be good at offering that. We need to do better as churches loving people, pre-married, married, even divorced. God's told us in the book, he hates divorce, what it does to kids and families and people, but he doesn't hate divorced people. That's not what that says.
I love that.
And
yes.
My job is to love people, and not to judge them, because I don't know what all they've gone through. Sometimes it's easy to hear one side of the story and sit back and go, yeah, you gotta, but you hear another side sometimes and you find out, so now I can understand why you're doing what you did.
Exactly. It's like so many times you hear, you talk to people and you say, well, I had a scriptural divorce, whatever that means, and
yes.
Then you talk to the person they got divorced from and they believe the same thing. And so it's impossible to unscramble that egg sometimes. And, I think the best thing is, like we've talked about before, is trying to catch that on the front end. And,
sure.
But it is difficult because even Christian marriages fall apart.
They do.
The ideal marriage, keep God first and all that. Still, we have a lot of divorce among the church and among Christians, and that's difficult. I watched my daughter and son-in-law get married last weekend, and I sat there and watched them starry-eyed looking at each other, and I thought to myself, y'all don't have a clue, And maybe that's good. I don't know, but I thought, you don't have a clue. But at least they understand what it means to be God-fearing, to love Jesus, that kind of thing.
That's right.
Talk a little bit about that, because I know you put a premium, you and your wife, when you do these seminars, you'll place a high premium on marriage being a three-dimensional affair. You, the other person, and then God.
Yeah, we're really big on what we call spiritual intimacy, and it's an intimacy that a lot of people don't talk about, and a lot of people don't even know about. Of course, we understand sexual intimacy, emotional intimacy, where we get to know one another. That's a big thing for couples when they're falling in love. They do a lot of communicating, a lot of talking, they fall in love. But spiritual intimacy is a combination of you, your spouse, and God in there. And it is just a huge thing that so many couples miss out on. One of the things that Lee and I feel like we do well together on is praying together, reading our Bible together, we worship together, we go to church together. We feel like those are some of the very high premium things that we do in our relationship that not only gives us a relationship, helps us with our relationship with God, but it also gives us an intimacy, a new kind of intimacy, a spiritual intimacy that a lot of couples don't experience. And what I mean by that is, when you've sat down and prayed with your wife, or had your wife pray with you, or you've prayed with your spouse, you get to see some places in their heart that generally are only reserved for them and God. You get to go into some secret places that you don't often get to hear or see or be a part of. And there's just so much intimacy in that couples don't realize, and they need to be aware of that. And so we feel, yeah, of course, you can't just say, we like God. God's number one. We're going to put God first in our marriage. It's got to be an action thing. You can't say it. You got to do it. You got to pray together. You got to read your Bible together. You got to hold each other a little bit accountable. There are times where Lee looks at me and goes, "Hey, this is best if we do this way. This is what God wants us to do."
Right.
Whatever it is. But going to church together and worshiping together. Those are premiums on making a relationship successful. We heard a statistic. We've been looking for it. We're in the process of finishing a book that's at the editor now. And we have heard a statistic that says couples that pray together regularly, the divorce rate drops to 12% in those relationships. Wow. We think that was a family focus on the family statistic, but we haven't been able to actually locate that, but we're working on it. And we feel like there's got to be some truth in the fact that couples that pray together, there's got to be a lower divorce rate there.
Yeah. You would think that would certainly go a long way towards helping lower the divorce rate.
Yeah.
What I hear you saying is that this is going to take work. And I don't think couples always understand that you can't put it on cruise control or automatic pilot. Something that I've heard you say several times is that if the grass looks greener on the other side, it's because they maintain it better or because they water it.
That's right.
Talk a little bit about what it takes to maintain a marriage. Maybe start with this. I know you've talked about before some myths about marriage, and maybe slide into some things that we can do to maintain our marriage.
This is our wheelhouse. This is the stuff that we love. Part of the big myths, there's several huge myths on marriage. One of those is that, great marriages just happen kind of by accident. You just wake up one day and you go, wow, how did we have such a great marriage? No one has a great marriage by accident. It would be like me going, tomorrow I'm going to get into shape and I'm going to build some muscle and lose some weight, and wake up in the morning and I look in the mirror and go, wow, look at me. It don't work that way.
No, it doesn't.
You have to go to the gym. You have to eat right. You have to exercise, whatever it is. And in marriage, it's the same way. You don't have a great marriage unless you work at it. And a lot of couples, what they do, a big mistake is they wait until they start having some marriage problems to start investing in their marriage. Now, that's a good thing. And if you're having marriage problems and you go, hey, I need to invest in my marriage, yes, you need to invest time, invest money, invest everything else. But a lot of couples wait until they have some marriage problems to start working on their marriage, where if you will work on your marriage when things are good, they'll be less bad.
Sure.
If you'll work on things that are going great, and we tend to have people out there that seem to think, when I have some marriage problems, we'll work on our marriage a little bit, but right now everything's going good. We had a young lady contact us one time, and she asked us, she said, when will you be doing a workshop in this location where she lived? And I emailed her back and I said, we were just there last month. I apologized. I said, I'm sorry. I thought we did a good job advertising. She said, oh, I knew y'all came, but we weren't having problems last month. and I was so confused because I was like, but that doesn't mean you don't show up and strengthen your marriage. She was ready for the workshop now that some problems had come up. And that's just one of the big myths. Now, part of the thing is as a man, and men do this, women do as well, but men are really bad about this. We work really hard to win that lady, that girl that we have fallen in love with. We're sending flowers, we're writing notes, we're opening doors, we're telling her she's beautiful. We're doing all the right things, saying all the right things. And then once she says, I do, we feel sometimes as a man like, hey, I've accomplished it. I've done it. I won her. She's mine. And that is a horrible myth. You can't stop pursuing your wife once you've won her. The pursuit has got to continue. She fell in love with a man who chased her and bought her flowers and held her hands and said sweet things. And she don't want to wake up 6 months later and go, where'd that guy go?
Right, exactly.
She wants to be married to that guy. And so it is our job, whether you're the husband or the wife, it is our job to continue to pursue our spouse. And we like to put it this way. Lee always says, if we'll work as hard to keep our spouse as we did to win them in the first place, we won't ever have any problems in our marriage.
I like that.
And yeah, we've got to do those things. Those are things like when you're talking about keeping the grass green in your marriage, couples need to be dating regularly, if not once a week, every other week. And some people go, hey, we can't afford a date. You go on a cheap date. Go hit the dollar menu at Sonic or at McDonald's and go to the park. If you can't score a babysitter, then you put the kids down and y'all play a board game. You know, sit on a porch with your spouse. Find some time alone with your spouse, but you can go on a date. You dated pre-marriage. You should be dating after you're married as well. It is fuel for your marriage, and that is something that couples stop, and they need to continue to date. That is a healthy thing for husbands and wives to do.
I like that you told the story one time at when you were at Oldham Lane, you and Lee, about an older couple, much older, that came to one of your seminars. And that really relates back to what you've been talking about continually working on your marriage. Tell us that story.
I would love to. I'd love to. We were in Sparta, Tennessee, and the couple, it was a couple in their 90s, and they came to a workshop. And of course, we have a lot of older couples come, and I like that because it kind of makes me look around and go, hey, if they've made it, we can make it too.
Sure.
But the Rosses, Mr. and Mrs. Ross, they sat on like row 2. And so between sessions, I would visit with them just to kind of find out who they were, what they did, that sort of thing. They were in their 90s. They still both lived at home. But the last couple of years, Mrs. Ross had become blind and had really had some health struggles. And so Mr. Ross had now taken over the complete care of his wife. He cooked all the meals. He helped her dress every day. He did all of his chores that he did every day. So he was in charge of her 100% living at home. And I asked him between one of the sessions, I said, Mr. Ross, I said, why are you here today? You know, I should give you the microphone and let you get up here and talk about what it means to be a husband and a man. And he said this, he said, I just thought there might be something I could learn today to better show my wife that I love her.
Wow.
And here's a man in his 90s, been married 70 plus years, that's going, I still want to learn how to better love my wife. And
That's
I was,
amazing.
not only was I challenged, but that man inspired me to don't you ever stop learning. Don't you ever stop trying to grow. You know, no matter how long you think you got it figured out, if Mr. Ross can look for ways to love his wife better in his 90s, I can too.
Yeah, there's always work to be done. You can always be better.
Right.
Yeah.
That's exactly right.
So talk a little bit about, I've heard you speak about marriage killers. So talk a little bit, I know you've mentioned some of those already, but talk a little bit about some of the things that will really kill a marriage if they're not handled properly.
There are several things, and I'll just touch on a couple that really stand out. One of those in our day and time is something that a lot of people are not addressing. There's a lot of marriage books, there's a lot of marriage material out there, but we still are not addressing this, and we're trying to address this in our workshops, and that is electronics and social media and its effect on marriages, and that is a marriage killer. Now cell phones can be I lost you. There you go. Okay. Cell phones can be a great thing in your marriage. You know, my wife and I, we text, we can keep up with one another. They can be a really good thing, but we find out also that cell phones can be very, very hard on marriages. A lot of times in marriages, when you finally have some time with your spouse at the end of the day, couples are sitting there and they're spending more time looking at this than they are their spouse who's finally across a room from them. We have couples that we deal with nearly every day that are texting or messaging someone of the opposite sex that they're not married to, and that's not a healthy thing. Personally, if you're deleting text messages so that your wife doesn't or your husband doesn't know who you're texting, or if you're putting a passcode on your phone where your spouse can't see what you're doing on your phone, personally, this is what we always say: you think that touching someone or flirting with someone is cheating on your marriage. If you've locked your spouse out of your cell phone because you're doing something on here you don't want them to know, you're not headed towards cheating. You're already doing it.
Yeah.
If you've got to hide something from your spouse, another relationship, a text message, your history on your cell phone, whatever it is, that's something you shouldn't be doing. And I visited with a district judge the other day. He's a friend of mine. And I usually ask him, because he sees lots of divorce cases, what are you seeing in court that we need to be talking about in marriage seminars? And boy, he jumped on that quick. He said, everybody I see are either they're doing something on their phone they weren't supposed to. They're texting somebody they weren't married to, and they've built an emotional affair or friendship with someone they're not married to, and it's turned into something very, very unhealthy. And we preach this a lot because we're not anti-cell phone. We're not anti-social media. Just handle it well and smart. I like having friends on Facebook, but there is no better friend in this world than my wife, and I don't want to cheat our friendship because I'm spending all my time looking at my phone.
I agree. That's great. So when we're talking about these marriage killers, would you say that a lot of it boils down to just selfishness? And, and
definitely.
Not putting the focus on God and on your spouse?
Yeah, it is easy. We get to be people sometimes. We're very selfish people. We think to ourselves, I deserve this, or if my spouse was doing a better job with this, I wouldn't feel obligated to do this. And so you can come up with every excuse in the world, and it all comes back to keeping the marriage on the front burner of the stove and not the back. You've got to not put your marriage on cruise control. You cannot come along and go, once we get all the kids raised and retire, we'll focus on our marriage, because you're going to wind up having not just empty nest, but you'll have empty marriage too.
Yeah. Now, you're someone who has raised 4 boys. You got one that'll be a senior, but he's the last one. They have gotten married, two of them.
I have 2 of them married and 2 that are not. So we're getting closer all the time to getting those guys. Yeah.
And still waiting on grandbabies. I know we talk about that
some.
some.
Oh man, I'm ready for that. But my kids obviously are not.
And how long is you and Lee been married?
We've been married 30. We're going to celebrate 31 years on the 12th of this month.
But I don't know about high school sweetheart, youth group sweethearts, right?
Yeah. We grew up in the same church, and she was a little younger than I was. And as silly as it sounds, I remember pointing her out to some of my buddies when I was in high school, going, when she gets a little older, she's going to be a knockout. I mean, I remember that. But I laugh because she was the one that made the first move when we were actually in high school. She says, I always tease her that she made this up, but she said that there was some guy that was chasing her that she was not interested in, and she said, can you pretend to be my boyfriend for just a little while so he'll leave me alone? And I said, sure, I will. And here we are 31 years later.
Not pretending anymore, though.
Yeah, I ask her every now and then. I go, now, we're still not pretending, right? We're good now, right? And so, yeah, we were high school sweethearts, and there were difficult things in marrying very young, but at the same time, there were also some pros. There's pros and cons both into marrying very young, and so
sure.
Yeah.
Well, what are some things that you and Lee have done personally to model to your children what a godly marriage looks like?
Well, we have tried really, really hard to allow our children to see us not just as mom and dad, but also as husband and wife.
That's a good point.
We don't want our kids just to go, that's mom and dad. We want them to know that we're married. And so we worked hard to have regular date nights to where we would go out. And there were times where the boys would go, why don't you take us with you tonight? And we would tell them, hey, we took you the last 3 times we went out to eat. This is our turn. We want to spend time together. And so we modeled that through date night, the way we treated and respected one another, the way we served one another, the way we talked about one another to our boys. I would never bash my wife to my kids. If I'm going to do anything, I'm going to brag about what awesome mama they have.
Yes.
But we have worked hard. We try to be affectionate somewhat in front of our boys. We're affectionate people, but we always like it every now and then. They'll say, "Ooh, gross," and we know we're doing a good job then. But we try to be affectionate. We want them to see us. You think about it, Chris, and our kids, my kids, your kids, everybody's kids. The only thing they learn about marriage is what they're seeing from their parents.
True.
And my job is to teach them. They've been in Trey's School of Marriage and Lee's School of Marriage. And so I'm either teaching them bad or I'm teaching them good. And I want to teach them that they are to, since I have boys, that they are to love and respect and to treat their wife with gentleness and kindness and love, because they've seen their father do that. That's very important that they have learned that from their father. And they've watched their mama be respectful to their father. And they're going to find a wife someday. If they get some girl they're dating someday and they go, she's kind of mean and not very nice, I want them to go, I know how a wife is supposed to treat her husband because I've watched my mama treat my dad with respect, and this ain't it, and I'm going to go find somebody else. So it's important as parents and even as grandparents. Our grandchildren are going to be watching what marriage looks like and learning about marriage and conflict resolution and all those things from us. And we've got to step up and do a good job.
I like that. You've talked about before your secrets to a long marriage, a long, successful marriage. Not to give it all away, but one of the things that you always talk about is, continuing to try to look good for your spouse. Wives don't always come to bed every night in your old sweats, and guys don't always wear your, holy underwear and all that. But what are some other good tips for long, successful marriages?
You mentioned it, and I'll follow up on that just a little bit. There's several things that are important. We kind of quit trying to impress our spouse once we marry them. Before marriage, if our fiance or boyfriend or girlfriend is coming over, I'm gonna get up and put on a clean shirt and brush my teeth and fix my hair,
clean the house,
and I'm gonna look good for them. We dressed up for them, and now when you get married, a lot of times you don't dress up anymore for each other. You just dress down. You walk in the door and you go, "Where's the pajama pants and my slippers? Where is my old t-shirt and my baggy sweatpants?" And that's another reason dating is good. It is good for a couple to dress up for one another and look good for one another, whether it's your sleepwear. Lee always says, tells the guys in the workshops, there is nothing sexier than a man who's just come out of the shower and clean and smells like soap at bedtime, instead of like grass where they just mowed or grill that they just smoked burgers on. She said, shower and brush your teeth and shave. She said, there is nothing nicer than that. And so, we've got to continue to work hard to impress one another, show each other that we love each other. Those things you did pre-marriage, keep doing those. Send your wife a gift certificate for a pedicure or flowers. Don't wait till you're in the doghouse to do that kind of stuff. Do that for no reason. And then wives, they used to brag. Their husbands, back before they got married, they'd follow them anywhere because they were constantly telling them how handsome they were and how strong they were and how good they were at whatever they were doing. And them husbands still love it when their wives tell them, "You are an awesome husband," or "You work so hard for our family." You just can't brag on those husbands enough. They'll do anything for a wife if you just give them a little bit of love and a little bit of bragging. That is just kind of how God made men.
Yes. And when you're talking about those things, one thing that I hear you say over and over again is do the best you can with what you've got.
That's right.
We get older, and if you're like me, we're losing our hair, and maybe we gain a little bit of weight. Maybe we're not as good looking as we used to be, and all that. So do the best you can with what you've got.
That is exactly right.
And not completely letting yourself go.
That's right. And I realized that I'd forgot to plug in my laptop, and I was about to die. So I'm moving over here for my charger.
Well, I thought you were leaving the podcast suddenly, but
no.
We're actually getting, close to the end here. But I do want you to say, a little bit about your seminars, Stronger Marriages, Stronger Families. What do you got coming up? Where are you going to be? Just maybe in the next few times that you're going to be out on the road.
We have got a lot of on-the-road trips planned. We're headed to Tennessee this weekend. Going to be in the kind of the Nashville, northern Tennessee area. We've got several places coming up that are kind of outside of Texas. We're Texas folks, but then toward the end of the year, we've got a couple in Texas again that we're coming back. You can find more of our stuff of where we're going to be and what we're doing at strongermarriageworkshops.com, or you can Google Trey and Lee Morgan, and it'll pull up our stuff, and you can find us there. But we do about 16 workshops a year, and we've been very blessed to be in Abilene and be with the church where you are, such a good church. And we just love the opportunity to talk to people about marriages and healthy marriages. And the thing, just real quick, that I'm always amazed about, we do a lot of social media stuff. We have a lot of social media followers, and a lot of our social media followers are not Christians, which we think is pretty awesome because it gives us a chance to, and we're blown away at the amount of people that send us messages going, where did you get all this new stuff? And this is like a breath of fresh air that you're putting out on social media. I'm so glad I found it. And we're like, this is all stuff that's been around for thousands of years. You can read about it in the Bible, you know?
Sure.
And they're just blown away that we're coming along, and it's like, where did you come up with put your spouse first? And we're like, well, Ephesians is a good place to start. But, it's just incredible to us that people are willing to listen. You just got to have to tell them. And when they do, it's incredibly easier when you do things the way God designed them to be, whether it's marriage or family. When you do things like God said, if you'll do it this way, boy, things just click and work so well.
Absolutely. You get God right, everything else falls into place, doesn't it?
Yeah, that's exactly right. And He's given us all the little tips we need in Scripture and in the Bible to be a husband, a wife, and a father, and a mother, and whatever it is. And if we follow those, man, things work so well compared to if we try to do things on our own.
Absolutely. And I will add to what you just said that you are the preaching minister at the Children's Church of Christ in Childress, Texas, a wonderful church that's doing great things in the community, always stepping out and helping and doing, and that's exciting too. And so if you're ever in the Childress area, stop by, listen to your sermon, worship with you, because I think everybody will be edified that does that. Trey, I want to thank you so much for joining us. Our best to you and Lee and your family, and thank you so much for being on the podcast. Again, Trey has a great social media presence, so you can find him at Stronger Marriages Workshops. You can find him online. .com. Yeah. You can find him online. You can find him on social media with Lee on Instagram, Facebook. Follow them, like them, and you will be blessed. And Trey, thanks again. I want to thank you. I want to thank all of you for watching and or listening. Remember, if you have any questions or comments, you can always reach me at chris.mccurley@rippleoflight.com. Get the word out. Please spread the news about the podcast. You can watch us on Facebook, YouTube, or listen to us on Spotify and iTunes. We thank you for being with us today. Until next time, may the Lord bless you and keep you. Sincerely, Chris.